Welcome to the Ecomodernist channel live. I'm Karl Pauls. I'm here with Gabe Ignetti, Chris Bergan, and our special guest. But first, I want to explain. Last week, I was at the Clean Power 2023 conference with Generation Atomic and NAYGN. We had a really great time. I got this shirt. I got to speak to a bunch of wind people about nuclear energy. Surprising amount of support. As well, we had a remote broadcast from New Orleans, Louisiana. So Adriano Autino is co-founder and former president of the Space Renaissance Initiative. He was elected at 2010's Space Renaissance International. Adriano has a diploma in industrial electronics and since 1971 has acted as a software and systems engineer. After then, he was a project manager and entrepreneur in the field of real-time automation systems. Adriano has authored and co-authored several books, papers, and articles on the theme of civilization expansion into outer space. Welcome, Adriano.
Thank you so much. Yes, so Space Renaissance International is a not-for-profit organization. It was founded in 2008, at the end of 2008, as a Space Renaissance Initiative. We discussed our philosophical manifesto for about 10 months. And in 2010, we founded the Space Renaissance International as an organization. Why Space Renaissance? Because our main concept at the beginning was from looking back at the 15th century Renaissance, historical Renaissance in Italy, when some rich families sponsored the rise of art and culture, namely the Medici family. So we were making a convention in 2008 called Colonizing the Moon and the Near-Earth Asteroid to start a new renaissance. So we thought that a new renaissance is needed now, and it can only be a space renaissance because 8 billion people cannot have any more development on this planet. So we have to go outside, to start building outside. This is the main philosophical concept that we are developing since now 14 years, more, 16 years.
Wow.
And yes, and we are making a Congress each 5 years, more or less, to be very quick and simple. In 2021, we approved a final resolution of our Congress saying that the priority is to start civilian space development before 2030. This is possible now because we have reusable rockets, and hopefully we will have a fully reusable launch system within this year, the Starship of SpaceX. And this is a key factor to downsize the cost to orbit, to start industrializing Earth orbit and the geolunar space. So this is the very priority. There are financial priorities, of course, and there are scientific, biological priorities, because in order to go in space and to work and live in space for a long time, we need to be protected from cosmic radiation. We need to have simulated gravity to avoid the decay of bones and muscles. We have to start working, to start raising green environments in space habitats in order to start raising space food and all this kind of things. So we are urging the space community to support us in this cultural struggle. And we are promoting an 18 SDG to the UN 2030 agenda. So, okay, I'm just going down to our main campaign in 2023. We are proposing an 18 SDG that is a space for all on Earth and beyond. And it means that this 18 SDG, but I think I will have time to tell more on this, about that in our conversation today. So now is what is Space Renaissance and what is doing, basically.
Right. So essentially, if I understand, a description of those activities, you are looking at the current efforts to colonize space, and you're thinking, what is it that is not happening? all the governments and all of the entrepreneurs like Musk, where do their space programs fall short?
Yes, we have, of course, our analysis of why and how we are 40 years late on this agenda, more or less. Unfortunately, NASA chose to make a not fully reusable machine. That was the space shuttle. It was only partially reusable, but each flight of the space shuttle costed about 500 million, and the cost per kilogram was $54,000. So these situations remains more or less steady for 40 years. And somehow it blocked the development of the private entrepreneurship in space because it was too expensive. Did change this situation was the 2024, the X Prize was winned by Scale Composite that made a trip to 100 kilometers with a very, very low investment, about 30 million. And that was a very important milestone that started to change the paradigm and encouraged a lot of new civilian space development for space tourism, for asteroid mining and moon mining, and a lot of things that we now seems to be almost happening. The cost to orbit is downsized. Basically, thanks to SpaceX, Elon Musk, stubborn strategy. He tries and tries until he succeeds. Okay, so what is missing in this scenario? This scenario is still confused. Of course, the main motivation seems to be the profit. Inside the space community, many are focused on the economical and financial issues. But we also have to think about humans, because people that will go to space in a few years, they will not be astronauts. They will be workers. They will be engineers. They will be business people. So the workers will go in space and will say, we want our rights, our civil rights. No, the astronauts are military. They don't have civil rights. They are spendable, unfortunately. But workers will go there and will say, okay, I want to have my insurance. I want to know what will happen with my bones. So we have to take care about the biological conditions in space. Protection from cosmic radiation, protection from physical decay, also from mental decay, because Scott Kelly, an American astronaut that was for 1 year on the space station, and when he came back to Earth, he wrote a beautiful book, Endurance, where he explained all the pains he had, not only when he was on board the space station, but mainly when he was back to Earth, because his biological system was no more used to Earth gravity. Therefore, he had very, very bad blood circulation problems. His legs were big like that. I saw the photograph. It's really amazing. He had a lot of other problems with equilibrium, with perception of the reality. So space can be a very, very harmful place for humans. So we have to take care of that. And so far, we didn't see this priority to be relevant. Why? Okay, why is it? It is another question. But to give you a very quick answer, because the paradigm is still the space exploration one and not the space settlement. Space exploration means that space exploration is made by military trained astronauts. They stay in space about maybe 6 months, apart from Scott Kelly and the Russian guy on the MI Air many years ago. The conditions are military defined, so they are obliged to have some hours of exercises, workout each day, and a lot of things. But you cannot ask a worker, a normal people going there to work and to live in space, to observe some kind of gymnastic training each day for 4 or 5 hours and so on. But because people will maybe they will do it for some months or even years. But at the end, they will say, no, why? I want my life. I like very much to work in space. Otherwise, I didn't came here. But however, I want my life. I wanted to decide what I want. So that means that we have to build, let me say, an Earth environment in space. So this is a new paradigm. It's a fully new way of thinking. That's why we say that we need a humanist philosophy to go to space. So what is missing is this humanist approach. Space Renaissance exists is to bring this concept to the space community and public opinion at large in order to make people understand why humanity desperately needs to go outside and to expand.
Wonderful. So space depends on human workers. And for someone who's a big consumer of cyberpunk and sci-fi, everything from Heinlein to The Expanse, this is pretty inspiring. We're getting into the real human diaspora where humanity and human workers using our shared technology, we will be in space someday. And it's not thanks to any one person or any one government. And I see the concept of Space Renaissance as a really big potential for that. So do you think that this other space race with the capitalists in Russia and the communists in China, is that going to create some kind of international cooperation? Or is there a scrappy group that will persevere and preserve human rights underneath it all?
Yeah, okay. We are entering what we call astropolitics. Yeah, another consequence of the downsizing of the cost to orbit and of the cost of spaceflight in general terms is that the superpowers understood that the moon is a very strategic place. So they want to be first to put their foot on the moon in order to be sure not to be excluded from astropolitics. So definitely, we are witnessing a new race to the moon. That's very much more concrete with respect to the first race to the moon of 50 years ago, because the goal of that race was just to go there and to put the flag on and to say, okay, we were here. It was let me say, a kind of status symbol.
It was symbolic. There was nothing practical.
Yes, symbolic. And the proof of that, you have it because for 40 years, they were somehow content of that. They didn't formulate new goals about the moon. They were happy to get profit from satellites, and nobody was questioning about that. It was never an objective of the big space agencies to have reusable rockets. But reusable rockets was the goal of us, ourselves, the space enthusiasts, the space advocates. We were discussing 30, 40 years ago about reusable rockets. And the big space agencies say, no, it's not possible because we don't have the technology. But a guy came called Elon and say, okay, we don't have a technology for a single stage to orbit, then make it two. Why not? 2 stages to orbit, both recoverable, both reusable. It was very simple. So that started to change with some delay, yes. And now the superpowers understood to go to the moon, even if the existing space law is quite controversial about that. Who can go to the moon and say, this piece of the moon is mine? The question, will they collaborate or compete or even worse to conflict? We don't know. It's hard to say. If I see it from a very, very distant philosophical way, I could say, okay, the important thing is that we go there. If they will be the military to go there, is better than not to go. But of course, we hope very much and we work for the space development to be inclusive, to be fully inclusive, because we have many emerging countries that are working hard to have a space policy, to have a new space agency, work very much for space to be really for all, space for all. When we say space for all, we mean for all people of Earth, for all the good-willing people that have a right to develop. And of course, the emerging countries' development is very critical because of the environmental issues, climate change and pollution, all this kind of thing. So until a few years ago, the very sad and brutal thing was that we developed countries, you emerging country, you cannot develop anymore because otherwise we will consume all of the remaining few resources of Earth. This was until a few years ago. But nowadays we can say, no, you emerging country, you can develop because we will develop together in space. And this will be good for the communities in space and will be good for people remaining on Earth because their economy will rise up again, because we will not anymore rise up the pressure inside our planet. We will develop outside. Therefore, in perspective, the pressure inside our planet will decrease, even if we continue to develop and grow up numerically and culturally and all these kind of things. So we hope they will collaborate to help the civilian space development, not only to think about making a military base on the moon.
So you said space for all, and then talked about the hope that these superpowers will share and help join this space for all idea. Is that something that can be done with international agreements, or is there international law, like through the UN? What is the structure of the law of going to space?
Well, we have a hope. It's more than a dream because we have also the proof that this is possible, because every astronaut that going to the space station, they never fight when they are there and they see Earth down from the window and they see this small ball in space. Is the famous overview effect written by Frank White. So they don't feel to fight. Even if they are now Russian and Americans, they work together when they are there. And so are the scientists. The big majority of scientists definitely don't like the war. And they don't think that war is a method to solve the problems. So I believe, no, I hope I can believe, let me say, that since going to space is, first of all, a scientific matter, so we have to involve scientists to go there. We cannot avoid to do that. In some way, we will have a kind of political leadership that will be a scientific political leadership. And this can influence feedback on their countries' national political leaders. So to solve our problems, our multiple crises that we have on Earth, we have to rely on science. And science can also maybe save us from hard confrontations, new wars and conflicts on Earth and also in space, of course, even if the space treaty prohibits weapons in space and all these kind of things.
Let me jump in on that topic. Is there an alternative to these international treaties for dealing with space junk? Is there something that the Space Renaissance has written about the subject of space junk so that we don't create a terrible blanket of junk that prevents the rest of us from going?
Yes, the orbital debris are a real problem. First of all, a problem because now they are a problem because it will make space navigation dangerous because the more the debris, the more possibility of crashing. So the first thing is to think about recovering, eliminating as much as possible. And also to do that, there are some legal problems that are an obstacle to that, because nowadays, international waters on Earth, the international water law says that if I find a wreckage in the sea. And this wreckage is, of course, a danger for the navigation. So I can take this wreckage and pull it to a port and use it. And it is mine, my property, because I found it. So this is one of the first legal problems to be somehow adjusted. The second consideration that we have to do is that these debris that are in orbit are not only a danger, but they are also a value, because they costed a lot to be put in orbit. They have an orbital velocity, so they have a useful momentum, can be reused, reprocessed in order to get powders for 3D printing and other useful things to build space infrastructure. These, in my opinion, and also in the opinion of our orbital debris and near-Earth objects committee, because we have several committees and specialists, make discussion about problems and opportunities. This will be the real way that space debris can be eliminated as a danger and exploited as a useful resource, and we can use them instead of just making them re-enter the atmosphere and burn in the re-entry. So this is more or less, let me say, the position about orbital debris.
So that's really fascinating. So you talk about Mark Kelly's...
Scott Kelly. Mark is the brother.
Right. Oh, right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. They think they are twins. They made an experiment because one of the two was on ISS and the other one was on Earth, and they made confrontation because of course, their DNA and everything were very, very similar, being twins.
And so, to address the effects of low gravity, what's the Space Renaissance solution, and how are you going to deal with the effects of low and zero gravity?
Well, the only solution by now is simulated gravity by a spinning infrastructure to make big space cities that or a cylinder or torus that can rotate, and if they are big enough, the Coriolis effect will not be very important. They can rotate very slowly, and we can get our 1G that we are used to. And if it is a torus, they can be not only one big torus, but there can be another torus in the middle, and of course the hub in the center. So in the center, you will have zero gravity, and that will be useful for industrial activities. Mm-hmm. In the middle, you can have, let's say, 50% G, and there you can have other kind of work and so on. And on the external wheel, you will have one full G, and it will be wonderful for habitation, for people to live and so on. I know there are scientists that are working on that, but nobody jumped up to say we will have it next year. No, it's a little bit complicated.
Go ahead, Chris has a question.
Yeah, just to help, I guess, me or audience members visualize the future you have in mind. Is there a science fiction series, books or movies that you think are similar to what you are envisioning? Be thinking of that might be a little bit more oriented towards the workers.
Well, I think Karl mentioned a couple of times The Expanse, a series that I like very much, and I also read all the 9 books so far written by James Corey. And I think that it could be, for some aspects, realistic. Where The Expanse fails, in my opinion, is not considering the benefit coming from space development. Of course, The Expanse is 200 years in the future. Humanity has expanded until the moons of Jupiter and so on. It is obvious that a very, very big, incredible industrial revolution occurred to develop all the spacecrafts and everything. Notwithstanding that, on Earth, we have 30 billion people, 80% unemployed, living of a subside. So this is a limit of many people that try to think about the future, not only in terms of science fiction, but of futurology, also from the anthropological point of view, their view is not dynamic, is not socially dynamic. They keep on thinking that in 200 years, the situation is the same that we have now. The only thing that changed is that the people is around in the solar system. But if people is around in the solar system, something should have changed on Earth too. We cannot have people without working, without doing anything. So one could ask why we had to go to space if we didn't solve any of the social problems that we had, even they are worsened. I am a humanist. I think that going to space, civilization will take profit of a very, very big availability of resources that will give very much more freedom because there will be resources enough for developing all the people of Earth and so on. This will reduce the reason for conflict in general terms because a majority of people likes to stay well, to work, to have fun, to love, to have children. They don't like to fight. People really likes to fight are a few psychopathic. It's not the majority of the people. Majority of the people suffer when they are constrained to fight. So I think the space will give us a real freedom to collaborate and to compete in a fair way. Compete without the loser will die or succumb in some way. I love The Expanse because I think it's a very good piece of modern science fiction. It is what we need now to imagine, not in 1,000 years, but in 100 years, what it can be our life. But I would like very much to discuss with the writers and with the director of the movie and so on about, from my anthropological and humanist point of view.
So I know in The Expanse, this is very focused on resource extraction and mining. Is it just going to be a free-for-all? Is it going to be super easy? Or are there going to be different problems that have to be solved when it comes to mineral extraction in extremely low and zero gravity environments?
Okay. Okay. Here you are touching a technical, scientific point, and it's not my specialty. I don't think it will be super easy to mine the asteroids. There are a lot of technical problems. Asteroids are not very compact. The asteroids are agglomerates of materials in an almost pure status. So to mine iron or other minerals from asteroids is not the same problem that we have on Earth, because on Earth, the iron is mixed by the big gravity of Earth. So the iron and other metals were mixed with the Earth and with the other components. So when you want to extract 1 kilo of iron from Earth, you have to apply several processes of refining, and that will not happen on the asteroid, because on the asteroid we will find iron in almost pure status, and so other metals like titanium and gold and also very precious metals and so on. So there are some easies and some difficulties. The easies are the fact that the asteroids are not compact, but are agglomerates of materials. Last but not least, asteroid could also be digged inside if they are big enough to get an habitat inside. So instead to build an on-hail structure from scratch, we could use an asteroid big enough to dig inside, and that will also be protected from radiation, having some meters of rock between the habitat and the space outside. I think asteroids are a great resource. So the Space Treaty thinks about moons and planets. So from the environmentalist point of view, you cannot say an asteroid is an environment. Well, to be honest, I don't share very much this concern that we should not alterate the moon environment or the Mars environment. I think we have to alterate and to make gardens on the moon and on Mars. This is my opinion. However, to discuss with some concerns about the rating, environments, and so on, we can consider asteroids like a repository of materials, not an environment. So this is maybe another thing that can facilitate the mining. While we have to discuss and to think about legal confrontation if we start to mining on the moon, I think making the same thing on the asteroid will be very much easier. And there are millions of asteroids. They were not all discovered so far. There are a lot of these things between Mars and Jupiter orbit.
Great. Go ahead with your question, Chris.
Well, you mentioned the asteroid, and that was actually an episode of the original Star Trek where they hollowed out an asteroid and lived there for multi-generations. But you also mentioned that asteroids are not concrete. They have agglomerated. They're loose rocks held together loosely. So building on the inside of an asteroid, and if you want some gravity, you'd have to spin the asteroid, which is extra forces, and I don't see how that would work if the asteroid is not very compacted initially.
Yeah, so of course, before making it rotating, we will have somehow to consolidate that the centrifugal force will not simply
like a tiny Dyson sphere, then.
Yes, we will have to consolidate using some kind of glue or I don't know what, or some kind of technique.
Well, how could people super excited about space play a role in getting more public support for the space renaissance?
So in Vienna, the 5th of June will be a session of the COPUOS, is the Committee for the Pacific Use of Space of the UN Committee. The National Space Society, maybe the biggest American space organization, together with SRI, will present a proposal for the first time, an official proposal to add an 18th SDG to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN 2030 agenda. That will be the first step, of course, because in order to really make this proposal to UN, we need to get at least one state party that endorse and back the second proposal. So this will be the big work to be done, but this is the first step. It's very important. After that, the 12th of June, we will have a public event, a virtual one, on Zoom and issued via YouTube, in which 25 organizations. We have now 25 organizations that signed this proposal of the 18 SDG. And among these organizations, we have the Mars Society, we have the Lifeboat Foundation, we have the the Institute of Steve Wolf, we have the Human Space Program of Frank White, and many, many others. So 25 space advocacy organizations joined together to bring ahead this proposal. We think that this is a very important campaign that will allow all of us to explain to the people at large why humanity needs to expand into space. And the main problem is to involve journalists, to involve media, the generalist media, large public opinion. Therefore, I'm very, very grateful to you, your invitation, and I think that this is an important moment for us to start talking to the people at large.
Wonderful. So find your local media and provide them tips. We're going to have some information. You can check Ecomodernist 1 on Twitter. Anyone who's watching will be sure and get some information about that, as well as myself, Karl Alex Pauls on Twitter. We'll start spreading the links to the invitation for these events so that we can spread the idea about accepting a sustainable development guideline for space exploration through the UN, and as well to brief people on coming together on this event. That will be wonderful. I'll be very happy to spread that. So before you go, why don't you tell us a little a bit about your latest book, A Greater World is Possible?
Greater World It's possible. Yeah. You can find it on Amazon. Just the greater word is possible. And it comes with, I think, 10 or 12 dollars, something like that. Yeah, it is a philosophical discussion and a moral discussion. The subtitle is The Expansion of Civilization Beyond the Limits of Our Planet is the moral issue of our time. So I see it as a duty toward the people. To the planet also, because now it's time to leave it a little bit in peace. Like when your mother say, no, please go outside. Don't stay here. Yeah.
Not ready.
Okay.
So, Adriano, thank you so much for your time with us. If you have any closing thoughts,
Yes,
please go ahead. What do you think is the best next step for the space renaissance, or any other topic you'd like to address?
Well, I hope this organization keep on growing as members, keep on growing as activities. We are now an official member of the IAF, the International Astronautical Federation. We are participating to the congresses, even the next one in Baku in Azerbaijan. So we are trying to bring our message everywhere. It can be useful to convince some people to join our struggle.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you again so much. This has been the Ecomodernist Channel Live. We broadcast every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube at the Ecomodernist Channel. That's Ecomodernist 1. You can also find us on Twitch at Soyadl, or on Twitter, my own personal Twitter and LinkedIn, as well as many other social networks, including the Ecomodernist Society of North America on Facebook. At 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on YouTube at the Ecomodernist Channel. That's Ecomodernist 1. You can also find us on Twitch at Soyadl, or on Twitter, my own personal Twitter and LinkedIn, as well as many other social networks, including the Ecomodernist Society of North America on Facebook. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful participation. And remember, emissions first, peace and justice will follow.
Please subscribe to us on YouTube, Ecomodernist Channel. Also to subscribe to us on Twitter and Facebook, Ecomodernist Society of North America.
And online at https://esna.earth.